Page 110. The following day he complained that they had taken his ration of bread. While you were asleep? No, I wasn't asleep. They threw themselves on me. They snatched it from me, my bread, and they beat me. Again, I can't go on, my son. Give me some water. I knew that he must not drink, but he pleaded with me so long that I gave in. Water was the worst poison for him. But what else could I do for him? With or without water, it would be over soon anyway. You, at least, have pity on me. Have pity on him, I, his only son. A week went by like that. Is this your father? Asked the Blockle test. Yes. He is very sick. The doctor won't do anything for him. He looked me straight in the eye. The doctor cannot do anything more for him, and neither can you. He placed his big, hairy hand on my shoulder and added, Listen to me, kid. Don't forget that you are in a concentration camp. In this place it is every man for himself, and you cannot think of others, not even your father. In this place there is no such thing as father, brother, friend. Each of us lives and dies alone. Let me give you good advice. Stop giving your ration of bread and soup to your old father. You cannot help him any more. And you are hurting yourself. In fact, you should be getting his rations. I listened to him without interrupting. He was right. I thought deep down, not daring to admit it to myself. Too late to save your old father? You could have 2 rations of bread, 2 rations of soup. It was only a fraction of a second, but it left me feeling guilty. I ran to get some soup and brought it to my father, but he did not want it. All he wanted was water. Don't drink water. Eat the soup. I'm burning up. Why are you so mean to me, my son? Water. I brought him water. Then I left the block for roll call. But I quickly turned back. I lay down on the upper bunk. The sick were allowed to stay in the block, so I would be sick. I didn't want to leave my father. All around me there was silence now, broken only by moaning. In front of the block, the SS were giving orders. An officer passed between the bunks. My father was pleading. My son, water, I'm burning up my insides. Silence over there, barked the officer. Eliza, continued my father, water. The officer came closer and shouted to him to be silent, but my father did not hear. He continued to call me. The officer wielded his club and dealt him a violent blow to the head. I didn't move. I was afraid. My body was afraid of another blow, this time to my head. My father groaned once more. I heard, Eliza. I could see that he was still breathing and gasped. I didn't move. Sorry, Dwight. When I came down from my bunk after roll call, I could see his lips trembling. He was murmuring something. I remained more than an hour leaning over him, looking at him, etching his bloody, broken face into my mind. Then I had to go to sleep. I climbed into my bunk above my father, who was still alive. The date was January 28th, 1945. I woke up at dawn on January 29th. On my father's cot there lay another sick person. They must have taken him away before daybreak and taken him to the crematorium. Perhaps he was still breathing. No prayers were said over his tomb, no candle lit in his memory. His last word had been my name. He had called out to me, and I had not answered. I did not weep, and it pained me that I could not weep, but I was out of tears. And deep inside me, if I could have searched the recesses of my feeble conscience, I might have found something like free at last. I remained in Buchenwald until April 11th. I shall not describe my life during that period. It no longer mattered. Since my father's death, nothing mattered to me anymore. I was transferred to the children's block, where there were 600 of us. The front was coming closer. I spent my days in total idleness, with only one desire, to eat. I no longer thought of my father or my mother. From time to time I would dream, but only about soup, an extra ration of soup. On April 5th, the wheel of history turned. It was late afternoon. We were standing inside the block, waiting for an SS to come and count us. He was late. Such lateness was unprecedented in the history of Buchenwald. Something must have happened. 2 hours later, the loudspeakers transmitted an order from the camp commandant. All Jews were together in the Appelplatz. This was the end. Hitler was about to keep his promise. The children of our block did as ordered. There was no choice. Gustav, the Blockle test, made it clear with his club, but on our way we met some prisoners who whispered to us, Go back to your block. The Germans plan to shoot you. Go back and don't move. We returned to the block. On our way there, we learned that the underground resistance of the camp had made the decision not to abandon the Jews and to prevent their liquidation. As it was getting late and the confusion was great, countless Jews had been passing as non-Jews. The Lagerall test had decided that a general roll call would take place the next day. Everybody would have to be present. The roll call took place. The Lager commandant announced that the Buchenwald camp would be liquidated. 10 blocks of inmates would be evacuated every day. From that moment on, there was no further distribution of bread and soup, and the evacuation began. Every day, a few thousand inmates passed the camp's gate and did not return. On April 10th, there were some 20,000 prisoners in the camp, among them a few hundred children. It was decided to evacuate all of us at once. By evening, afterward, they would blow up the camp, and so we herded onto the huge apple plots in ranks of 5, waiting for the gate to open. Suddenly, the sirens began to scream. Alert! We went back to the blocks. It was too late to evacuate us that evening. The evacuation was postponed to the next day. Hunger was tormenting us. We had not eaten for nearly 6 days, except for a few stalks of grass and some potato peels found on the grounds of the kitchen. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the SS took positions throughout the camp and began to herd the last of us toward the apple plots. The resistance movement decided at that point to act. Armed men appeared from everywhere. Bursts of gunshots, grenades exploding. We, the children, remained flat on the floor of the block. The battle did not last long. Around noon, everything was calm again. The SS had fled and the resistance had taken charge of the camp. At 6 o'clock that afternoon, the first American tank stood at the gates of Buchenwald. Our first act as free men was to throw ourselves onto the provisions. That's all we thought about. No thought of revenge or of parents, only of bread. And even when we were no longer hungry, not one of us thought of revenge. The next day, a few of the young men ran into Weimar to bring back some potatoes and clothes and to sleep with girls, but still no trace of revenge. 3 days after the liberation of Buchenwald, I became very ill, some form of poisoning. I was transferred to a hospital and spent 2 weeks between life and death. One day, when I was able to get up, I decided to look at myself in the mirror on the opposite wall. I had not seen myself since the ghetto. From the depths of the mirror, a corpse was contemplating me. The look in his eyes as he gazed at me has never left me.